Hi.
I'm very excited because we are talking about something very counterintuitive, which is um, the sacrificial origins of uh, human society, or I guess at least social life, I feel like. So Girard has obviously written a lot about his mimetic theory, and now it's all over YouTube as well, which is great. And one of the key portions related to mimetic rivalry is that it gets resolved by this scapegoat mechanism, which is based on sacrifice. And so we are talking about the text Sacrifice by Rene Girard. And it's a collection of three lectures where he kind of uses a non ethnographic lens or ethnocentric lens, and he uh, looks through the Brahmanas and the Puranas to see what those archaic versions of Hinduism um, used to find divine. And interestingly, what they found divine is um, sacrificing the first creature, which was either Purusha or Prajapati, and then sacrifice itself. And it's very fascinating to think about how that sacrificial um, activity seems to seep into all of our societal structures, at least according to Girard. And uh, and then he also talks about the difference between those religions, those archaic religions, and Christianity or the gospel, which he finds to be the most true as a representation. So that's what we're doing overall. But I think we're going to dive into a specific aspect of it. So maybe you can kind of contextualize the hallucinogens that he was talking about in terms of soma, etc.
So, somewhere in Sacrifice, the book, he talks about there's this like sub subsection of the lecture that's titled Return to the God Soma. And he talks about Soma for like maybe 5 or 6 short pages. And he tells us that Soma is a drug or it's some substance that is a sacrificial substance. And in the beginning, he says that it's important to have some kind of substances during a sacrifice because the fundamental thing that's happening in a sacrifice is that people are surrogating their personal rivalries with one person onto a group rivalry against a single scapegoat. And in order for a sacrifice to work effectively and economically, one person has to kind of be the object of everyone's everyone's attack in a way, and they need to for like if they have someone they want to attack deep inside, they need to kind of project it onto this one thing. So he says that it's not uncommon for there to be substances in the use of this because you need a kind of frenzy and a kind of not thinking very clearly, or like if there was a drug which made you think very keenly and like scientifically, then basically the sacrifice would not happen. So you need some way to obscure the lines or like to create a frenzy. But the cool part is that rather than just talk about this as a substance, he refers to a part in the source material he's using in the Brahmanas, which describes the creation of Soma, which is, at least to me, it seemed like a very arbitrary, normal thing, but he reads into it and he says that the description itself carries evidence of an understanding that the Brahmanas had of what he thinks is mimetic theory. And these are a few excerpts from that, which I'll read out and then I'll get your reaction on them. So,
Mm-hmm.
when one purchases Soma, and this is the one here is the sacrificer, so the person who's doing the sacrifice. When one purchases Soma, one purchases it to reign over the hymns, to dominate the hymns in reality. So this sentence in this is the like to give some context, this is when
Mm-hmm.
he's talking to the person from whom the Soma is being purchased. The Soma is there in the mountains. So he says when the sacrificers go to purchase the soma from the cultivators, this is what they say. When one purchases soma, one purchases it to reign over the hymns, to dominate the hymns. In reality, one kills soma. So another bit of information is that soma is also a god, and there is violence being conducted to the god. It's not just a plant. It's a god, and it's somewhat blasphemous to destroy it. So he says that one is actually killing soma in when they're processing it. Um, but one basically assumes the myth that I purchase it to reign over the hymns, to dominate the hymns, and not to kill it. So this is what they tell the seller. And before using the soma, the priest presents the sacred stems to a person of the lower class, who then sells them to him at a high price. Whoever sells the soma is wicked. He, this intermediary, is the villain in this drama, and it is on him that the wrath of the god and the punishment for the murder must fall. So I guess the interesting part about this is that they're saying that uh, there's a way in which people know that what they're doing is wrong, but they're diverting it. But I'll get your reaction on this.
Mm-hmm. On the overall theory or the specific intermediary thing, because these are a little distant from each other in the context of
I
hallucinogens, right?
I think let's do these quotes first and then the broader thing.
The broader thing. Okay, that's great. So, the general idea is that the very idea of using this soma or like a drug is for you to for your attention to be diverted from the fact that you are sacrificing someone in order to get peace and like kind of solve the issue of the chaos that has been erupted because of mimetic rivalry. So the whole idea of using a drug is if these people who are conducting the sacrifice, they can you need to blind them of the fact that they're conducting violence because they're sacrificing someone, and so you need to distract them from the in a way the evil that they're doing, and so that's why you're using these drugs in the first place. And then at the deeper level, for the specific group of sacrificers whose job in the whole sacrifice is to purchase the drug or to kill the plant from the mountains and get that drug, is even you have to distract them from the fact that they are conducting violence on a god. And so to do that, they have to believe and they have to communicate to the god that, oh god, please forgive me for kind of killing a version of you, but I'm actually doing it to preserve the sanctity, like the sanctity of the very hymns that make you sacred, you know. So, I mean, I guess my reaction to it is just the explanation of it. But in terms of contextualizing it for what we see in our world, I think the idea is that people who tend to kind of say attack a certain scapegoat in times of chaos. So, for example, like there's a lot of political polarization in the US, and so it's like a very classic kind of example to think about is that there'll be these two big factions of people who have opposing beliefs, and so the mimetic theories uh, resolution to that is that we find a scapegoat and we all kind of are supposed to sacrifice that scapegoat in order for us to be like, okay, this is what we do not want. And in some ways people from both sides thought that Joe Biden is someone who's not really up to the job right now because of his age and other characteristics. So now, but there must be some people whose specific job is to kind of so killing the soma in this context is probably like maybe not paying attention to the good policies of Joe Biden. So there might be some Democrats who actually agree with Joe Biden's policies and actually don't mind that he was too old because he was actually still doing a fine job if they were thinking about like for those Democrats, they might think that he actually is doing a good job. But the thing is, but they have to believe that no, but Joe Biden has to go because he is old and he has to be that, in a way, the scapegoat that kind of brings more people together. So the way he will be justifying to Joe Biden, who's the Soma in this case, is that, well, I know that I'm committing violence on you by kind of diminishing your policies and over exaggerating your age and your inability to do the job. But remember, I'm doing this for the sanctity of our country and how our country is going to do in the next few years. So that
Mm,
is kind of like a direct comparison between the
wow.
hallucinogenic thing and like a real life situation.
So I was thinking, like they talk about how after the main sacrifice is done, there are rituals that become common in society which replay the sacrifice again and again. So it can be a
Mm-hmm.
marriage or a funeral or something like that. And then I was kind of thinking about movies, and I was thinking about a cinema hall and
Mm-hmm.
how, like, let's say you witnessed a crime, like, let's say, let's say you, let's say your parents died and they were killed in a alley, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then, and if you are a writer, you'll kind of put that into the Batman, and then everyone will watch the Batman. So one way of
Mm-hmm.
like reliving it is everyone will watch it. And
Mm-hmm.
in that context, Soma is potentially, initially I was thinking that maybe Soma can be thought of like an analogy to Soma would be if literally in movies, before going to movies, people consume a substance that makes
Mm-hmm.
them associate with the character more.
Mm-hmm.
Like some substance that, let's say, makes the faces a little blurry and makes them see their personal lives more clearly in the other person. Then I realized
Mm-hmm.
maybe that is what acting and craft and all this is. That can it allow you to project your own thing onto the thing? Um, so I
That's a
was
great point. Terrific. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was thinking that there's so in the modern, I don't know how relevant it'll be to Soma, but it seemed to me in the modern world, there's some kind of a virtualization of sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
So even the sacrificial rites are not, um, they're not real. In the sense, I don't know if you've gone to a funeral or a wedding recently, but at a wedding, for example, um,
Mm-hmm.
it would not be insane to imagine that 20 years from now, you will have weddings where the sacrifices will be performed based on recordings. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not even bizarre to imagine that you could have a funeral which is based on recordings.
Do you mean that instead of a priest reading the hymns, it's like a recording of the hymns playing? Is that what you're saying by
Yeah,
virtualization?
yeah.
Okay,
In some
got
way
it.
that, like I was saying, that now we've entered a time and even the rehearsal or the redoing the sacrifice, it's not real. We kind of do it inside a screen. The preparation of soma is
Mm-hmm.
therefore done by the filmmakers in a way. Well, so it's not exactly the very first time a sacrifice is done, but in every subsequent sacrifice to make it work, if there's a hallucinogen, then the similar role that someone is doing is of a filmmaker who makes you kind of see even
Mm-hmm.
Shah Rukh Khan as a villain who you think is your bully from class or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you try to compare filmmaking to the
Mm-hmm.
preparation of Soma,
First of all, I think it's more abstract than that. It's not just a filmmaker, it's more like a storyteller, like, right? I think all storytellers are doing that. The soma in stories is just that we invent all of these other things that are the rules of the story world that we are creating, which enable the sacrifice to happen. And then we are like, oh yeah, like this is completely my situation, even though there'll be thousands of granular story aspects which are different from your life. I mean, even the Dark Knight, right? I mean, not, I guess Dark Knight is superhero, but even a contextual thing like something like a general thing like Before Sunrise, for example, where people are just talking to each other, even that is based on rules that you're going to forget within the first few minutes. It's like they just met and they crazily decided to spend like a night just talking in a European city, even though they don't know each other. But we kind of forget that, and our experience of watching the movie is more about thinking about, oh yeah, this is how you fall in love, or this is how I want to fall in love. So I think just generally narratives invent all these rules that they're actually tricking you with forgetting, and they're going to make you feel that, oh yeah, I feel this feeling, but it's a completely different world. And so that is kind of the soma in this example. uh, that is the soma that is required for you to consume the story. But what is the sacrifice that is happening when you're consuming a story? I think
It's
you
not a
should.
sacrifice, it's like the new rituals. Like basically they say that there's one sacrifice, and then because it's so powerful, all the other sacrifices are just like repeating the original sacrifice.
Uh-huh.
So it's
I mean,
more
I
like a
think sorry to interrupt, but um, I think there is a sacrifice when you're consuming a story, which is you're sacrificing your own lived experience, and you're kind of sacrificing your time, and you're kind of also sacrificing your individual state of like your individual presence, and you're kind of giving your attention and mind to someone else's vision, you
hmm,
know. So I think that is the sacrifice. And you're kind of blinded to that by the invention of all of these like stakes that kind of absorb you, right? Which is the soma. And then you consume and you sacrifice it, and you actually feel more resolved than you were when you started watching the film before you made the sacrifice. I really do think that his like this sacrifice theory is like kind of all encompassing if you want to extend it. You know, it's one of those theories. And we don't
hmm,
know if it's right or not, but it's like you can literally implicate it. And I think it's healthier to implicate it literally so that then it's not confusing to think about, you know.
hmm,
The priests do these sacrificial rites in general. Soma is a part of it, which is like kind of buying the drug, which is like a key point for the sacrifice, but also conducting the whole sacrificial rite. Priests will rid themselves of the guilt of conducting the sacrifice by just getting intermediaries involved to do the actual thing. So in the example of Soma, it's priests will actually get directly the Soma cut from the mountains, then they'll give it to the like to the lower class of people, and then they'll buy it again from the lower class. You know, this
hmm.
is what the I guess the either the Brahmanas or the Puranas say. Yeah, so the
But
priests are the storytellers,
it's almost like
and
blaming the cinematographer for the failure of the film, or some weird version of that.
for example, the producers of the movie, which includes everyone, actor, director, everyone, they made the story, right? And there is a guilt of kind of showing these bad, terrible things that kind of you should not be showing to people in a way, you know?
Hmm,
And we have this discussion only with films like Animal, but even films like that have murder mysteries, right? Like it's crazy. Like if you think about it,
hmm,
but to rid themselves of the guilt of that, it's like they're just going to sell it to the say to the distributor or something, you know. And it's like there will be these people who will just market the film, you know. So
hmm.
maybe it's like for businesses that do weird things, or for filmmakers it's the marketers.
I actually think I got it.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
have you seen the Tarantino clip where he's trying to defend violence in his films to
Hmm.
that British Indian interviewer?
Yes, but I don't
Yeah.
remember it being a point. I just remember him being mad at that, mad at
So he was
people
mad
asking.
at that, and he was trying to make the claim that like violence is just entertaining. He
Hmm.
was just saying it's fun to watch. I think the
Hmm.
selling it to a lower class and then buying it back at a higher price or something and saying that whoever sells it is wicked. I almost feel like calling such films as pure entertainment is
Hmm.
actually the way of ridding of like not realizing what you're doing. Like in many
Ah,
ways,
right.
if a film does have a lot of murder, it is in every
Hmm.
way not just entertainment. There is probably someone being sacrificed there.
Exactly.
I'm not saying Ramadhir is innocent, nor am I saying that the villain in Django Unchained is innocent. Like
Hmm.
I don't know the films well enough to say that, but I am saying that if there's violence happening in the movie, um, if you're blaming in this case it to the Soma seller, um, I think the only thing I can think of is like if you just call it as entertainment or something, or like if you blame the viewer, for example. I actually think if you blame the viewer, that
Hmm.
might actually be something
I mean,
similar to
you
this.
are. And
You
you are.
are,
If you say that the audience is just having fun with it, then you're
yeah,
actually blaming the viewer. And it's like,
yeah,
and they are the lower caste, right? Because the viewer is not thinking about it as actively as you are,
yeah.
right? the viewer is just like a lower class who's just trying to get
Or
fun.
like
And in
if
the case, yeah,
or it's like saying, well, there are people who buy it. So like,
yeah,
why have you made the, or like with latent, it's like, why have you said that? And one defense will be, well, people have consumed it. So
yeah.
it's almost like saying this that, it's the person who's sold the Soma. Um,
Hmm.
and I don't know if that fully maps on, but well, it was fun to try and
But
make a
yeah,
comparison.
it definitely maps a lot. Yeah, maps a lot. And I think for whoever's listening, they will, if they've gotten this far, they will be definitely able to
We'll do fill the
kind of,
gaps, yeah.
yeah, fill the gaps. Okay, so you want to move to this one or
Yeah,
go
this is a
further?
continuation of the stuff we were just reading before. This is still on the
Hmm.
Soma part.
Hmm.
Do you think we should read it out?
Um, Sacrifice is a strategy for preventing violence from spreading throughout the community, for diverting toward an expendable victim, the dangerous disorder. I think we kind of already discussed that. Um, President. Dun, dun. So I do want to touch on the last paragraph of actually last paragraph of the of page 57, and then also on page 56 the first like sentence of the second paragraph, which both refer to sacrificial substitution. Okay,
Yeah.
so last paragraph it clearly says, scapegoat mechanism is the mechanism of substitution made utterly convincing, dot dot dot. And then in page 56 it's like, because the sacrificial victim is here deemed even more precious than the being for whom it is substituted. So the general idea is, and actually we might have missed a little of this aspect when we were talking about Soma, but the idea is that in archaic religions and in archaic societies, the sacrifice was literal. It's like, if people are fighting and stuff, we all are like, we've got to pick one person who we basically kill, and we'll all just divert our hatred between each other or like our animalistic instincts towards that person, and then he'll be the enemy, or her, I guess, and we'll kill, and then we'll all feel like in unity temporarily, right? But
Mm.
obviously that is not sustainable as you evolve as a species. So eventually what happened is that people started being substituted for animals. Animals started being substituted for other things that you burn. Like these days no one even does, probably doesn't do animals. um,
Yeah. You do
we
you
usually
do plants. Do like at most fruits or a coconut.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it's stuff like that you sacrifice now. And so that the idea is sacrificial substitution. And what they're saying is that for us to be distracted from the fact that we're not actually sacrificing a person, but we're substituting a person for these smaller things, and still believing in the idea that the sacrificial um, right is still going to work for us, is because a, we have soma, we have these hallucinogenic aspects to the sacrifice that kind of distract us from it, um, and b, it's like easier to do them than actually sacrifice things. Mhm.
Yeah.
And do you want me to
Yeah.
finish the thought? The point basically is that um, the main revelation for Girard from the fact that we are substituting what's actually sacrificed is the fact that it doesn't even matter what we're sacrificing. So that is the one of the key insights of sacrifice, is that for us humans to be organized and to feel at peace, not only do we need to we sacrifice things, but it doesn't even matter what we're sacrificing. What matters is just that we sacrifice something, because that diverts our myth from that diverts our mind from the problems we have, and it just directs it to this thing that is being sacrificed. So for example, I'm from Hyderabad, we have tons of pujas, right? And in all our pujas, it's like doing the puja is more important than kind of understanding all this granular mantras and stuff. Not saying that everyone is like that, but a lot of people, the main thing is just doing the right, sacrificial right, than
Mm.
what the right is about. Myth is neither entirely fictive nor entirely real. It transfigures a phenomenon that the author persecutors do not understand. Mimetic theory recovers the miserable truth. Myth is the work of persecutors who, having been reconciled at so little expense, are too complacent to show a critical spirit and rehabilitate their victim. Better to divinize him.
Myth is not documentary, and myth is not fantasy. It's like something in the middle or something like that. And I think it's also saying that that part I really found interesting, like better than rehabilitating, just
Hmm.
divinizing. That's almost like some kind of escapism, or
हाँ एंड आई थिंक हम
yeah.
करते भी बहुत हैं एक्चुअली चीज़ों के साथ बट it's like talking about God or thinking about God. Okay, believing in God. Statement one is believing in God needs a leap of faith. Okay. Statement two is because of statement one, I think we don't even like investigate the myths related to God or the ideas related to God or how close
Hmm.
God is to humanity, how close that is, right? Like this guy is really bringing God close to us.
If the great religious texts were not all speaking of the same phenomenon, the scapegoat mechanism, if they spoke merely of this and that, they would differ, to be sure, but their differences would hold neither religious nor anthropological interest. This would be the indifferent and fastidious difference of contemporary differentialism and the difference without identity of ideological neo-Saussurianism and other nonsense that contemporary nihilism embraces so as to conjure away all real problems, all truly interesting questions. Judaism and Christianity are radically different from myths because they alone reveal a phenomenon whose existence myths do not even suspect, not because they are unfamiliar with it, but because they are one with it. The biblical and evangelical slowly deprive humanity of its last sacrificial crutches. They confront us with our own violence. And I think Girard says they do that by revealing the fact that the victim itself is innocent.
Mhm.
The paradox of the scapegoat. To understand that the scapegoat, far from being guilty, is innocent and arbitrarily chosen, is to destroy its structuring power. It is to truly demythify myths or deconstruct them, if you like. It is to shatter archaic religion, but only the archaic. Religion is revealed that is entirely other and yet inseparable from the old. We must therefore recognize the existence of a paradox in two parts. This is kind of complicated. Even I'm not sure I fully got it, but
Yeah.
no text structured by a scapegoat phenomenon can reveal the mechanism that structures it. This first part of the paradox defines mythology. The second is biblical. No text that reveals the scapegoat mechanism can be structured by it. It declares the truth of myth. The fact that this double paradox goes generally unnoticed by Christians themselves says much about the extraordinary affinity of the human race for scapegoats and about the nearly infinite resources of our hypocrisy for holding the Judeo-Christian revelation in check.
Mhm.
Yeah, what do you think that means?
Okay. So, I mean, first we talked about the scapegoat mechanism, which is to unify people. Um, you have to sacrifice a single victim, right? Now he's saying that, okay, now at a more deeper level, you have to understand that actually there is a paradox at play in general. Um, and it apply and that paradox is different for archaic religions or mythical stories and for Christianity, right? Which he thinks is the truest kind of understanding of humanity. He thinks Christianity or the gospel is like the best representation of humanity. So, in terms of of the myth, he's saying ki, there the paradox is that they are defined by the scapegoat mechanism completely. They are just fully reliant on us victimizing this single person or creature, etc., and then sacrificing them without question, assuming that that victim is guilty, and then just sacrificing them, and then kind of being like, yeah भाई वो तो guilty था ना, अब मतलब हमने sacrifice कर दिया, अब हम सब साथ में हैं types. But the paradox is that because it is structured by scapegoat mechanism, it will always be blind to the fact that it is scapegoating a victim that is innocent and it is not guilty at all. And so the paradox is that because even though it's reliant more on scapegoating, it is like at a theoretical level, it is actually even more blind to it. And it works because it is blind to it. Whereas Christianity is actually not blind to the fact that it is scapegoating, that the sacrifice is victimizing someone who's innocent. Because we all who anyone who like gets the point of Christianity is that Jesus is like innocent. Jesus को गलत मतलब उनको मारना गलत था basically. तो so उसमें उसमें का paradox ये है कि भाई even though the scapegoat mechanism does not structure Christianity, it is more obvious there that we did scapegoat someone, you know.
What do you think generally of the book? Like, if you had to think about the thing in general, where do you think it's weakest? Like the entire theory. Like, what do you think it misses out the most?
अच्छा अभी पूरा
Like,
डायलॉग
like,
मारा और अब ओके एंड अब इसका
like,
क्रिटिक करना.
like, what's the part that you think is BS or could potentially be BS?
So he said that
And to put it respectfully, but like I mean it more like, um, what's the part you're most skeptical of?
uh-huh. So this one broad claim he makes is that sacrificial rites are the first human phenomena that are truly human and that are something that we invented. Okay, so and let me be
Hmm.
careful. He means not the first primordial sacrifice. तो जो पहला sacrifice हुआ था प्रजापति का या पुरुषा का, that he does think is a divine sacrifice. Okay, like the gods, when they created us, they created us with that idea कि भाई
Yeah,
मैं sacrifice हुआ हूं तुम्हारे आने के लिए. बट उसके बाद
yeah,
से जब से हमने क्या कहते हैं सब्सटीट्यूशन शुरू किया, सैक्रिफिशियल सब्सटीट्यूशन शुरू किया, वो
yeah.
जिरार्ड सेज इज द फर्स्ट ह्यूमन थिंग वी डिड. वो मुझे एक्चुअली समझ नहीं आया कि मतलब हाउ एंड ही आई डोंट इवन थिंक ही एग्जैक्टली एक्सप्लेन्ड व्हाई दैट इज द फर्स्ट human activity. um, and also I mean like I'm very young and I think overall just the idea that one theory can just explain everything you see around, I think
Hmm.
someone who's young should be skeptical of that because we are impressionable. So I'm also just the whole theory, I don't want to believe it too strongly because then ऐसा होगा कि भाई हम कुछ भी देखते हैं हाँ ये तो वही होता है कि भाई स्केपगोटिंग मैकेनिज्म हो गई यहाँ तो मतलब वो नहीं करना कभी भी मतलब आई थिंक.
Yeah.
तो जनरली भी मैं उस तरीके से स्केप्टिकल हूँ कि ज्यादा नहीं ले लेना इसको क्योंकि फिर इट विल जस्ट काइंड ऑफ इट हैज द पावर टू काइंड ऑफ सीप ऑल योर एंटायर परसेप्शन ऑफ द वर्ल्ड.
The central imagery in Christianity is of a god or a son of a god, half human, half god, bleeding. And
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that in Hinduism there are no gods that bleed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, like basically there are no gods that are at fault. Even if they're at fault, they don't bleed. So they're
Mm-hmm.
never actually fully victimized.
Mm-hmm.
So I almost, in a creepy way, I don't even know if this is, if I'm like trying to project my own thoughts onto it, but I almost feel like when I read it, the subtle thing I picked up on was that it almost felt like there should have been a god that bled, and then we've hidden him or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like for some reason, the imagery that kept coming, and this is not based on any single sentence, but the imagery that kept coming to my head is that almost like there's a hidden or a lost god in Hinduism that
Mm-hmm.
like bled for everyone. Because the myths are too close. If we completely forget about the book and just think of it as Girard stuff and then Hinduism stuff, like what does
Mm-hmm.
this mean? From our the little we know ourselves, then like I kind of felt that the part where he talks about that like time wears stuff away. Like there's a part where he says that time wears stuff away. It over time you naturally hide all the really dark and violent parts of history or like of myth, and then you just retain it. You retain the fact that it happened, but you kind of obscure the actual violence of it. So it
Mm-hmm.
almost seems to me that there. were images of bleeding gods, and
Hmm.
there was a god that bled, or there was a Christ type of, not Christ type of god, but there was a god that got some of this. And I almost feel like for some reason Girard thinks that time has done this. I almost feel that whatever is lacking in the Hindu scriptures compared to what he thinks the Bible is, or I have a feeling almost all of it is intentional, and I have a feeling that some specific God has been hidden. And I don't know
Hmm.
what your reaction to this wacky theory is, but I almost feel like there's a hidden God, or a hidden.
Contextualized.
Yeah. So the point, so towards the very end, after Gerard has explained the Christian thing and he's now coming back to the Brahmanas, he basically
Hmm.
says that, okay, he initially spoke about, just to give the reader, the listener an overview, he spoke about Prajapati, who's the lord of creatures, and he explains how somewhere in that there is there is an element of there is a true crime. Um, who was the other character before
Purusha.
Prajapati? Yeah, so he says in Purusha there's no reason to think of him as guilty. It's just that they dismember him or they break him up, but they
Uh-huh.
don't show a crime. With Prajapati, they say there's crime. He's the lord of creatures, and he does incest because he wants to sleep with his own daughter and so on and so
I mean,
forth.
not just because he wants
And
to sleep with his own daughter, it's because वो
everyone is his creation.
हाँ तो प्रोजेनी मतलब ह्यूमैनिटी को बनाने के लिए ही उनको इंसिस्ट करना पड़ेगा मतलब
Yeah.
करके था पॉइंट.
And so he says that there is a true reason for the victimhood.
हम्म.
And then he speaks about Soma, where he says, which is like a side thing.
या.
And towards the end, brings up two other stories that he says that they kind of have the same essence as the Jesus thing, but they use satire
हम्म.
to reveal the mechanism as opposed to the seriousness that the resurrection has.
Yep.
And I don't know about you, but actually we discussed this. We both were not familiar with these two stories. The
हम्म.
first story was of Manu and how um, he was basically getting convinced by two people pretending to be Brahmins of sacrificing stuff, and he almost sacrificed his wife until Indra intervened. Um, yeah, until Indra intervened, and he basically kind of stopped. But that story depicted that there is like a very satirical or a stupid part to sacrifice, that you would want to sacrifice even what you want to defend in your life.
हाँ.
And then this was the very last story from the Buddha birth stories, which I'll let you explain. I didn't see any depth in this, in the
हम्म.
sense when I read it, it didn't blow my mind. But
हम्म.
you did have an interesting angle to this, so we can get into that.
Uh-huh. I mean, I just thought that was very funny, first of all, you know. I just remember liking it, and I feel like it reads just like a classic example of, you know, like it can kind of whatever you um, try to do, like or try to sacrifice, like you might end up becoming the victim yourself. And remind me what the unique take you're referring to is.
The horror comedy versus
Ah, I see. So that is not just about this story. And so the general idea is that Gerard loves Christianity. So his point is that Christianity is the true explanation of societal structures because in that, unlike the Brahmanas and the Puranas, sacrifice is done of Jesus, but here the sacrifice is correctly said to be a wrong thing. It's a bad thing. वहां पे प्रजापति और पुरुषा को जब किया था अक्यूज और विक्टिमाइज करके सैक्रिफाइस किया था वहां पे ऐसा बोला था कि भाई तुम सोचो ही नहीं कि उनकी क्या गलती है उससे फर्क ही नहीं पड़ता है यू शुड जस्ट सैक्रिफाइस देम ठीक है वेरस क्रिश्चियनिटी में एक्चुअली ऐसे बोलते हैं नहीं नहीं भाई सैक्रिफाइस करना गलत है सही नहीं है गलत है and then he is like, but, and then in the end, Gerard is like, but hold up, don't just think that I'm saying that Christianity is better than the Vedic scriptures, because I do see through Vedic scriptures some satire that is supposed to kind of question whether sacrifice is a good thing or not. I don't want to
Hmm.
just say that Hinduism generally believes that sacrifice is good, right? So उसमें वो दो सटायर स्टोरी उसने बताई कॉमेडी वाली, जो ये भी है कॉमेडी, इसमें भी ऐसा ही है कि एक बंदा है, ठीक है, मतलब चैपलेन है, उसकी जो वाइफ है वो और कोई और, मतलब आई थिंक कोई किसी टाइप के बंदे से उसके वाइफ का कुछ चल रहा था।
Someone who looks like him. Someone who looks like him.
समवन लुक्स लाइक हिम का थोड़ा चक्कर टाइप चल रहा था। तो वो गया किंग
Yeah.
के पास और वो बोला कि भाई ऐसे बंदे की सैक्रिफाइस हमें जरूरत है हमारे किंगडम में, ठीक है, जो, क्योंकि जरूरत है बस, तब हमारे किंगडम पीसफुल हो जाएगा, ठीक हो जाएगा। पर फिर उसकी बीवी का चक्कर चल रहा था, तो उसकी बीवी ने बता दिया उसके अफेयर वाले बंदे को कि भाई देख ले, सैक्रिफाइस करवा रहा है मेरा पति। तो फिर वो बंदा चले गया, वो बंदा सारे भग गया, बाकी सब लोगों को लेके भग गया बाहर। एंड द ओनली गाय हु वाज लेफ्ट वाज आर प्रोटैगनिस्ट, एंड इट वाज ओनली हिज काइंड ऑफ पीपल हु हैड टू बी सैक्रिफाइस्ड। तो वही मर गया फिर एग्जीक्यूशन में, ठीक है। एंड what I like is that this actually is very parallel to the cinematic universes that we have seen that have been successful in uh, films, because Christianity uses the sadness of sacrificing someone who's innocent, and it plays on sadness and drama to make the point. And I think the equivalent of that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is dramatic, and it is all about kind of making it more and more realistic, the idea of superheroes existing who can do like crazy stuff. And at the same time, a lot of people try to do cinematic universes in Bollywood following MCU, but the one that really, really worked and went off is actually not a serious one, not particularly a spy one, but the horror comedy universe, which is the Stree universe, right? All of them were pretty big hits. Um, so Stree, Munjaya, Stree 2, and I think Bhedia 2, not fully sure about that. But that's the universe that's really going off right now. And I just thought that maybe it's in our culture that like sacrifices work more through comedy and kind of through like that kind of distraction as opposed to a sad distraction wala idea, you know?
And I've noticed this a lot in the way in which it's kind of strange, but even if you look at festivals,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a way in which, at least in Indian myth, I don't know about tribal myth and stuff, but there is a kind of, I think, almost humor to stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if you look at the creation of Ganesh, Lord Ganesh,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty gruesome. A dad kills his wife's creation slash room guard.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, uh, Lord Shiv's wife creates um, Lord Ganesh out of her, I think, out of a body clay or something, and then Lord Shiv gets angry. He kills him.
Mm-hmm.
In any other myth in the world, that would be described in a horrific way. Like if you look at, I think the guy who was Zeus's dad. There are
Mm-hmm.
images of him. I don't know if you've seen the image of. I think it's called. Like I think if you look it up, I think it's called Satan devouring. Or like I think it's called someone devouring Zeus.
So I should look.
Devouring Zeus. Yeah. If you go to image, yeah, Saturn. So I'm obviously, and I should triple down on this. I'm
Mhm.
obviously not comparing this to Lord
Mhm.
Shiv.
Yeah.
In any, if there is a comparison, this could be some comparison to Kans trying to kill every offspring of his sister who was prophesied to kill him. So
Mhm.
it's probably more similar to that, but there are ways in which the beheading of that has been depicted in a very normal, nice way, and then in a strange way the resurrection of Lord Ganesh with the elephant head. It's not. I don't want to say it's funny. It's not funny. I don't want to say it's satirical, but it is not serious. It's
Mhm.
definitely not serious.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some depictions of of Parvati crying tears of blood, but it's not well. But then there's a revival. There's not even a gap. There's a small gap.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's almost a cultural difference here as well, where or at least in like maybe the main belt of Hinduism, that it's not that. I don't know what word it is, but I wouldn't say satirical, but it's not serious. Now, maybe this is just the Amar Chitra Kathaization of
No, but you have to tell, can you qualify
myth.
that? Like, why is it, can you qualify why it's not serious? What do you mean by that?
Um,
Or, I mean, I could make
no,
a,
no, no. I think I have an
Mhm.
answer. Most people don't know it. That's why it's not serious.
Right. I was gonna go there.
Most,
Yeah.
yeah, most people don't know that the creation of Ganesha necessitated a semi-murder.
And I mean, even if they
Yeah.
don't know it, I mean,
No,
even,
it actually required a double murder. It required animal sacrifice of the elephant, and it
uh-huh.
required human sacrifice of the boy.
Hmm. And I feel like even if you know it, like even if you know this fact, that's not what comes to your mind when you think about
You won't pray
Lord
to it.
Ganesh.
Yes, you won't. Yes, you won't pray to the input to Ganesha.
Uh-huh.
There is a way of imagining Christ post resurrection in the perfect form, and then there's a way of thinking of him while he's on the thing. So no one, there's no, you won't go to a temple and you'll see a picture of a headless Ganesh. You'll only
Yeah.
pray to the so and
Hmm.
I always wonder why he didn't find a human face. Um,
Hmm.
I have a strange question. Do you think the money note, like a note of money, has anything to do with this book? Because money, in some ways, is a sacrifice of that value. You can buy
Hmm.
something with it. If you give
Hmm.
it to someone, let's say on someone's birthday, if you have earned 100 rupees and you give them 90 rupees, you are in some ways sacrificing something, or like the note is some kind of a virtualization of it. Or even now, one way of thinking of this is at sacrifices in temples or in sacrifices of today, you'll instead of doing animal sacrifice or plant sacrifice or human sacrifice, you sacrifice money now.
वही पैसे देते हैं हाँ. Hmm.
And money is connected to value in the sense there is no price to a human life, but there is a price to an animal life. So the same way someone would want to up the ante when it comes to sacrifice. Maybe there are people who compete to up the ante when it comes to monetary things when they're doing puja. So
Hmm.
where do you think money comes in?
I think money comes in terms of sacrifice and I don't know about scapegoat mechanism, but at least in terms of sacrifice, is just the fact that any kind of exchange is sacrificing a lot of stuff because of the concept of opportunity cost. So basically, the sacrifice thing is sacrifice phenomena is basically in terms of modern life, one of the key manifestations of that is opportunity cost. That anything you're doing, you're kind of clearly not doing 10,000 other things. Anything you're spending money on, you're clearly not spending money on 10,000 other things that you could be spending. So, in that way, I think sacrifice is very important in that economic activity is essential for our world to work right now, right? Because we have so many different stakeholders. You have to spend money here so that someone can eat there and etc.
Yeah,
Right? तो वो वाला scapegoat mechanism हो रहा है यहाँ पे कि तुम your ability to, for example, buy like something like an iPhone for your kid or something, that thing you're sacrificing, maybe say if you're paying taxes, for example, for the common good, you know, um, and सो दैट इज अ स्केपगोट मैकेनिज्म इन दैट हम सब ने ये डिसाइड किया कि भाई हम टैक्स भरेंगे, ठीक है, हम अपना पैसा थोड़ा सैक्रिफाइस करेंगे और सब लोग अपना जो भी उनकी क्या कहते हैं नॉट राइवलरी बट लाइक ऑल देयर हेट फॉर एग्जांपल. I mean, yeah, I mean, basically all the extra money that we would want to, for example, spend on other things, we are actually spending it on taxes, for example, right? ताकि सबका एक्स्ट्रा मतलब इन वे सबका एक्स्ट्रा पैसा एक्चुअली टैक्सेस में जाए, तो हम सैक्रिफाइस वहां कर रहे हैं एंड फिर सबका
Hmm.
फायदा हो रहा है उससे, टाइप ऑफ थिंग.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, can I just bring up one meme? Actually, I just saw on Dunn's
Yeah.
channel. Is that it's like कि a boss is like कि भाई अब तू घर चले जा, इतना काम कर लिया तूने और कितना काम करेगा. तो एम्प्लॉय इज लाइक कि नहीं सर, मुझे और काम करना है, ठीक है, मैं इसके लिए काम कर रहा हूँ, ठीक है. वो अपनी फोटो दिखाता है, तो तुम्हारे डेस्क पे तुम्हारी फैमिली की फोटो होती है, पर वो फोटो दिखाते हैं, फोटो निर्मला सीतारमण की होती है कि भाई मैं टैक्स भरने के लिए काम कर रहा
Hmm.
हूँ. या.
Yeah. Do you think there's a do you think latent could have happened in the US? Do you think
So
or it could happen in the Western world, or do you think there's something Indian about it?
the show or the problem that happened with the show?
The scapegoating in it, the scapegoating incident. I would consider it a scapegoating incident.
Okay. Uh,
Maybe you wouldn't consider it a scapegoating incident, but
um, okay, well, maybe you should qualify it first then. Like, because I mean, and
well,
also you should talk about, like, because
yeah,
Varun Maya had a video also, you should, cite that.
this guy made a joke that was inappropriate, and like everyone. This show was maybe the fastest rising comedy show, very popular,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone was laughing. And then one moment, like everyone stopped laughing, and there was a court case and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, yeah,
I mean, no,
it
but
was,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Why is it scapegoating? That's the question, right?
Mm, well, I'm obviously don't want to compare uh Ranveer Lavadia to Jesus. I don't think that's correct. But there was a part in Sacrifice actually um that I found pretty interesting. I think I'll even be able to find it in 1 minute.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And you can tell me the page also.
yeah, just 1 second. Um, there was a part. Yeah, the mob that cries, page 69.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the mob that cries, "Crucify him," had 4 days earlier welcomed Jesus as a conqueror. This reversal is a mimetic phenomenon so
Banal.
banal, so commonplace that the Gospels do not even acknowledge it. It is already present in the story of Job. His community has grown weary, it seems, of venerating his idol and takes into its head to lynch him. Dude, love. Ranveer Lavadia and Samir Raina were like very popular a week
Mm-hmm.
before that.
Yeah.
Ranveer Lavadia was popular on both the right and the left, the religious and the non-religious, for bridging the two things. He was not obviously the prime minister or a political person, but he was like easily the least. He was joked at for being bad, but he was like a bit of a hero.
Mm-hmm.
And so was Samay Raina. Samay Raina was this like normal person who was like breaking through very quickly, quick as rise, I would say, as a comedian.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I would say the communities didn't disown them, so it was almost like the people. One argument for them not being a scapegoat is that it was people who didn't like them before continue to not like him, and they started speaking as opposed to Pehle, the people who were speaking were people who only liked him, and the people who didn't like him were just keeping quiet. So it was
Mm-hmm.
just maybe an expression thing. I think there was some scapegoating happening here.
In terms of us kind of all, everyone channeling our energy about mean comedy, disrespectful comedy, channeling all of that energy towards this incident, I think is very appropriate. And I think in that way it fits right in with the idea of the scapegoat mechanism. We are kind of, at least in the short term, sacrificing these like two major figures to kind of restore the idea of what is decent for public discourse. So I think that is true. But at the same time, I think that the scapegoat mechanism is more blinded to what the scapegoating is about. We keep copying each other. Whereas I think in the case of Samirana and Beer Bicycle, it's very clear why. you would sacrifice them. So that accusation is very legitimate. There's nothing hidden there. So it's actually closer to Christianity. The minority is the one that's has communicated about it, and so hence it's actually fair. It's closer to that. That obviously is dependent on what you think should be discussed in discourse or not.